In the name of Allah, good morning. Speaking of terrorism and the situation of terrorism, a lot of details were mentioned, but I would like to look into the root causes of terrorism. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the global processes show us that today's structure of politics and in security is subject to change. Those are the changes that are based on geopolitical values, on new realities, and the emergence of new international players. The implications of those changes are mostly affected by strong competition, which leads to the establishment of great differences of understanding between powerful states. And the most important of them is the transfer of the world power from Western to Eastern Hemisphere. So from Atlantic to the East Asia. For the first time in the past 4 centuries, international changes will not depend only on the will of the West, because one group of powerful players now is playing the role of managing those changes. Another important matter I would like to speak of is the emergence of strong geopolitical systems in densely populated areas, which changes the pace of developments. The region of the West Asia, which was referred to as Middle East by mistake, actually at some time, due to its geostrategical features, is the main focus of changes on the global level. And one of the evidence is the change in the Islamic civilization, the development and prosperity of the Islamic states. That's the effect that disturbs many players, specifically the United States, which understands it only too well that should the Islamic world be united, the security regime in terms of geopolitics will become a most powerful instrument in the system, and they try to prevent that so that the Asian system of security will never take shape, so that there would be no consolidation since it runs counter to the Western and US interests. So that's the reason the United States try to pit some countries against others. Ladies and gentlemen, the policy of dominance, monopoly, and prejudiced and biased approach to the security areas create fruitful area for the development of terrorism. In other words, you can really see what Washington does. They really arrange the most horrible campaign of terror, and we've been watching that for the past 25 years. I think in terms of geopolitics, it will generate hundreds of crises in the next 25 years. The role of terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the events of the past 2 decades, and the establishment and the mutual civil wars, specifically in Syria and Iraq, is the evidence of that bitter truth. That's exactly the reason why open violence of ISIS in opposing other groups and players and the strengthening of that base, of ISIS base, and its spread to other countries has turned into the focus of geopolitical discussions. I can mention a number of factors that enhance the process. Inefficiency of anti-ISIS coalition led by US in the framework of the control chaos policy, and occupation of Palestinian lands, and Zionist crimes, and the racist policy in the Palestine lands, provocation of the against the Islamic people following the presidency of Trump and suppression of all the freedoms and the silence of international community and the projection of some countries of security matters into their home affairs, and Iran phobia, violation of national sovereignty of other countries, for instance, military attacks against Yemen and bloodshed in Yemen, and at the same time approval on the part of many great powers are all the facts that testify to that. So we can see that those countries, they help extremists and terrorists and put together with economic crisis and poverty in the world, they are the factors which justify that broad threat of terrorism, that enhance the process of terrorism, which poses a great threat to regional security. Ladies and gentlemen, the defeat and destruction of the ISIS infrastructure, which has become possible because of the Iraqi and Syrian armed forces and support, universal support on the part of Iran and Russia, together with Syria, made its role in Asia. The fever of terrorism has ceased down, but there is a long way till the extradition of that phenomenon, and we can really expect a new wave of fundamentalism, and we should be prepared for the transformation of that global threat. The transformation can be viewed in the methods that are used by the ISIS leaders. And for the total defeat of the terrorist groups, we need to defeat them in all the areas, including the ideological one. Those plans are carried out by terrorists. We can see some kamikaze and suicidal bombers and other attempts, and really all those attempts can turn into a real threat to individual regions and countries. Besides, the defeat of ISIS would mean the regional defeat of the United States, and there is a strong belief that this defeat may unleash a new phase of violence in the region, so that to fill the gap, and in other words, until we do not eradicate the main factors of ISIS, and as long as the terrorists are armed with tens of millions of dollars by some Western countries and the United States, and as long as the United States government would focus on its selfish targets, and it has become even more obvious with the presence of Trump. So as long as those threats continue, we can expect outbursts of terrorism in other regions. Good news is that today we have already a great experience of fighting terrorism. We are ready to share that experience with all the countries who would like to counter terrorism, and together we can really prevent any new outbursts of violence. To my regret, I should state that stability is something that has not been achieved in my region, and the regional tension between regional players is mounting. It leaves us very little chance for total settlement, and the greatest problem of the region is that regional countries do not have a unified and single understanding of the problem. And instead of trying to integrate and unite in the face of terrorism, some countries try to find some sponsors who would, they believe, who would protect them from those threats. And as long as those attempts continue, can hardly expect any settlement. The Islamic Republic of Iran is convinced that those are the main challenges that threaten millions of lives of the people, and in order to efficiently and effectively withstand that threat and to establish stability, we need to elaborate defense policy and security policy based on cultural, religious, and economic ties in the region. We believe that in a virtual environment and in cyber environment, terrorism is spreading its effort, covering greater geography, and regional countries should really see it as the main threat. The experience of cooperation between such countries and Iran, Syria, Turkey, and Russia in countering ISIS can serve an example for the extension of cooperation that would cover all countries of the region.
We stand against utilitarianism and domination of United States, which is supporting Zionist regimes, expanding the ideas of extremism, and they consider any intervention policy good towards the countries of the regions, which runs counter to the will and to the actions of the governments. Iran welcomes the creative role of Russia in its strategy and considers it's very effective in preserving the territorial integrity of the Arab states. The Islamic Republic of Iran joins the common initiative and stands against any military interventions towards other countries and considers it is necessary to respect their territorial integrity and national sovereignty, is prepared on the basis of regional cooperation to put an end to sufferings of the oppressed peoples of the region. We consider that the agreements is a very effective example of the international cooperation, which actually is a good example of cooperation of all to respect the international law and in understanding of international and regional security. The obligations on behalf of the United States and West and looking for the prerequisites to infringe the situation, we believe it is very harmful to the situation of international trust. We believe that Islamic Republic of Iran will comply to its obligations, and the forces which will undermine these agreements led by the United States will bear responsibilities for national consequences in terms of infringing security. Islamic Republic of Iran considers the strengthening of defensive capability and it considers its the legitimate right to fortify its sphere, especially in anti-missile defense, and will consider and will do it decisively. I would like also to explain one thing here in the end, and it wasn't foreseen in this text, jihad, which the extremist units are using. This is a sacred word, and in Islamic countries is also perceived as the protection of the territory of its country. And this is a sacred word, and I suggest instead of using the word jihadist groupings, to use the word terrorist organization. And Islam is the a religion of peace and empathy, and has nothing to do with these groups of terrorism. I would like to thank once again General of the Army Sergei Shoigu and other organizers of this very important and interesting conference, and I believe that we will obtain the necessary results on the way to strengthen the international security. Thank you.